The year is 2022 as of the recording of this video, and as you're watching this video, it's probably the year afterward or further on in the future, but if you caught the tail end of 2022, good for you. But 2022 is a huge year for a lot of different scientific reasons. Let's go back in time. Number 7, Artemis 1. A good effort, but merely an honorable mention. On the 6th of November of 2022, NASA launched their giant rocket. Massively over budget, massively overdue, and it went up to the moon. Now this is number 7. This is an honorable mention for the top 5. But it does deserve to be mentioned here somewhere. I'm not particularly keen on the Space Launch System by NASA because there are plenty of other companies that could do it for a lot cheaper. Now, although this isn't any huge news or anything, NASA hasn't launched anything to the moon in well over a few decades, and so bringing stuff back to the moon is a huge step towards going to Mars. Number 6, we have a collaboration between NASA and SpaceX. Congratulations on crashing a thing into another thing in space. In November of 2021, NASA and SpaceX launched DART, a mission to try to divert an asteroid from its current trajectory. This was done safely away from Earth. It was an asteroid orbiting an asteroid, but on September the 26th of 2022, the DART crashed into its target, and we measured the diversion that it created in the smaller asteroid's orbit. Now this is huge because this is a huge step towards making sure that our home planet doesn't get hit by anything devastating. Number 5, we have another massively over-budget and overdue project by NASA. This time it's a giant camera. Now the reason this doesn't make the top 5 is because NASA keeps outdoing themselves, this time with the James Webb Space Telescope. On Christmas Day of 2021, NASA launched their biggest, baddest telescope yet. On July 12th of 2022, it reached L2 and started orbiting around it. The second Lagrange point, or L2, is a point at which the spacecraft can orbit and basically stay stationary enough to be a telescope. It's not orbiting around the Earth like the Hubble is, and by doing that, it's well out of the atmosphere and the Earth dominates a much smaller portion of the view of the telescope. After reaching its final orbit around the second Lagrangian point, James Webb Space Telescope started taking some spectacular images in the infrared of stuff that we've never seen before. For example, JWST managed to image the oldest galaxy known to mankind to date, and this was within mere weeks of it reaching its final orbit. Among some of the other images in its portfolio, it has some redone images from the Hubble Space Telescope in infrared. They're spectacular. It also has some super cool images in infrared of Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and all of those other further planets. These images are all available for download for free on the James Webb Space Telescope website. Number 4, we have a particle that probably shouldn't even exist. Now, I'm a huge physics nerd, so the discovery of a pentaquark really boggled my mind. On July 5th of 2022, scientists at the Large Hadron Collider managed to find a particle with 5 quarks in it. Now, this is really strange. Let me explain. Quarks are pretty much the smallest thing we know exists, and to quote Hank Green, they make up everything that we can see and that we know exists. Now normally quarks are found in groups of 2 or 3. If it's 2, it's a quark and an antiquark, and they make what's called a meson. We don't need to talk about those. Now if there's 3 quarks, they make up what's called a baryon. They're typically 3 positive non-antiquarks, and they make up a baryon, which can be a proton or a neutron or all sorts of particles that you don't need to really know about. Now, a while back we discovered quarks in groups of 4, which was kind of unheard of at the time because we had only found them in groups of 2 or 3. Now, just this past year, on July 5th of 2022, the Large Hadron Collider team discovered a pentaquark, or a collection of 5 quarks bound together. While this isn't necessarily the most useful information, it is definitely one of the most important scientific discoveries of 2022. Primarily because pentaquarks have never been observed before. Coming in at number 3, we have a mummy that never meant to be a mummy. Now, if there were a list of professions that I would choose in the field of science, chemistry, biology, anthropology would kind of be at the bottom, but at the same time, they are some of the most important sciences to date. This is why the discovery of a woolly mammoth, petrified, frozen in permafrost in Canada, piqued my interest and deserves the number 3 spot on this list. Now, normally when we find fossils, we find bones. And they're not even the real bones of the thing, they're bones that have been replaced by some kind of stone that's harder than the rest. However, on the 21st of June 2022, miners in the Yukon Territory of Canada discovered a petrified woolly mammoth that was preserved indefinitely in the permafrost. Now, because this specimen was frozen, it remained basically mummified until we just dug it up for 30,000 years. Normally, like I said, we only find bones. But in this specimen, this baby woolly mammoth from 30,000 years ago, we found skin and even hair. This is the best preserved specimen that anybody has found to date, and it offers the entire scientific community a glimpse back into what life might have been like 30,000 years ago. In second place, we have a man who was replaced by part pig. While I sound cynical in this voiceover, I really am quite impressed. While the medical field has never been of much interest to me personally, the first xenogenic heart transplant more than deserves the number 2 spot on this list. On January 7th of 2022, doctors at the University of Maryland replaced 57-year-old David Bennett's heart with the heart of a pig. Now, the pig's heart was genetically modified. It was not straight out of the animal and put into this human. But after living more than 2 months after the date of surgery, David Bennett remains the pioneer in xenogenic surgery and is the first person to receive a xenogenic heart transplant. While his passing on the 8th of March 2022 is quite unfortunate, here are what the doctors that worked with him have to say.
It's important to know that the patient, was very brave. He was very brave, and he clearly indicated that if he didn't live long enough, he just wanted to be sure we could learn something, and I think that is really admirable.
Since he couldn't receive a traditional heart transplant, his huge leap of faith in the medical community extended his life by more than 2 months, which, for me, deserves the number 2 spot, if not the number 1, on this list. And coming in at number 1, we have the discovery of... What do you mean? I'm not going to tell you in the voiceover, just watch the video. Now, if 2022 had ended at the end of November rather than at the end of December, that would have been the list. That would have been it. There would have been one more since I needed 2 honorable mentions, but the xenogenic heart transplant would have remained at the top. But there's one thing, and you've probably heard about it, you probably know what I'm going to talk about, that tops everything on this list. Now, personally, I would deem this the biggest scientific breakthrough or discovery of 2022, and that is fusion. The huge advancement in fusion was made by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California. What did they do? They got more energy out of a fusion reaction than they put into it, which is a huge milestone for running our world on fusion. Let me explain to you how this works. In the core of the sun, there's hydrogen, which is the lightest element. It consists of a single proton and a single electron. But because the sun is plasma, this hydrogen consists of a single proton and the electrons are floating around somewhere else. But because the sun is so huge, the core of the sun has so much pressure that it creates a ton of heat, and that heat inherently creates more pressure. This is what causes the protons to get close enough together to stick together. Now, why do they stick together? Because like charges will repel each other. Well, because there's enough heat and pressure in the core of the sun, these protons are moving around at such great speeds that eventually some are going to smash into each other. And when they smash into each other, the electromagnetism of like charges repel gets canceled out by another force that is significantly stronger that pulls them together, this force being the strong force. Anyway, once these protons stick together, they have now become a helium nucleus, but without the neutrons. Now, there's some other complex processes that go on to turn this 2-proton jumble into a 2-proton to neutron jumble, which is what we know as helium. But I don't know exactly how it works. I can share that with you in a later video. But basically, we're taking two things and smushing them together. But why does this release energy? Well, if you look at any periodic table, you know the mass of a hydrogen atom, and you know the mass of a helium atom. From that, plus from the mass of a proton and the mass of a neutron, you can learn that 2 protons plus 2 neutrons equals 1 helium atom. But at the same time, that helium atom does not weigh quite as much as the 4 parts when they're separated. This difference in mass is known as the mass defect. And where did the mass go? Well, it turns out that we need to talk to Einstein and realize that his most famous equation means that in this fusion reaction, this mass turns into energy. Now this is why the sun can be what it is. It's fusing hydrogen into helium and then releasing all that energy in the form of light and heat. Now the goal is to do this same thing here on Earth, so we can get pure light or pure heat or pure electricity, however we want to spin it, out of pure hydrogen. This has proven very difficult to do because we've known about it for many years now, but the first time we've successfully done it is at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California in 2022. What scientists did was they took a little sphere of hydrogen and shined a bunch of lasers at it. Don't physicists come up with the greatest solutions? And while we put in 2 megajoules of laser energy into this little sphere, it released, upon fusion, 3 megajoules of energy. So we got free energy. Now this isn't perfect because we put in like a few hundred megajoules of energy just to get the lasers to fire, and so it wasn't quite efficient. It wasn't efficient on an engineering standpoint because the lasers are horrifyingly inefficient for the amount of energy that can be obtained from the fusion. However, if you're just looking at it from a physics standpoint and how small of an area the fusion is happening in, we put energy into it and it released more than we put into it. So this is huge, which means that eventually we're just gonna have fusion as our primary source of energy. I don't know how the oil industry is going to compensate for this because this energy is basically free. Once we get it, we can continue to power itself and it will be everywhere and it's completely clean. Like I said, the oil industry is screwed. But unfortunately, this form of energy won't be widespread for a while because, like I said, the efficiency of the lasers is just not on par with the efficiency of the physics. But now that we know the possibility is there, we know that we can fuse stuff into other stuff here on Earth, and we can harness that energy. Now, even if I stop making videos for eternity, there will be at least one more on this channel, and that will be whenever fusion is our primary source of energy. I'll see you then. No, but seriously, fusion in about 10 years could be how we power everything that exists. And with zero emissions, it seems right now that there are very few drawbacks. But anyway, now that I've centered myself, there'll be a video here, and you can click on my face to subscribe if you really want to. Thanks for watching.